Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host of my new podcast, Pause and Rewind. I'll be chatting to changemakers, thought leaders, and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now. But how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now. Because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes, and what makes our guests tick. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey there, and welcome to this episode of Pause and Rewind. I hope that you're good and keeping well. I have some exciting news before I dive into this episode. Pause and Rewind is going live. That's right, for one night only, I'll be joined by an in-person audience, aka hopefully you, for my first live recording of the podcast. And I'll be joined by a truly special guest, the wonderful Shah Bailey. Shah is someone who I consider a personal hero. I know she is to so many people, and it's going to be a great conversation. It will be held at the Common Press in Shoreditch, and you can grab your tickets from the link in my bio, and also on the Common Press Instagram page. But I would love you to be there for the first in person to celebrate a whole year of Pause and Rewind. We'll also be celebrating Lesbian Visibility Week and Shah and her origin story. Shah is someone who truly shows up for our community, and I can't think of a better person to host this one-on-one in-person conversation with. So do join us. It means the world to us. There's going to be a lot of love and fun in that room. But on to today's episode, I am absolutely delighted to be joined on this episode by a former colleague and friend, and another person who shows up in amazing ways, Terry Eastham. Terry and I worked together for a long time, over a decade, at London South Bank University. And as you'll hear at the start of this episode, Terry is the person who really got me into staff networks and, curating kind of pride activity for our workplace, London South Bank University. I also volunteered with Terry. We were part of the original volunteer crew for Queer Britain, the UK's dedicated and only LGBTQ plus museum. But I was super excited to dive into Terry's origin story as someone that came out later in life, but had a history in the armed forces, and I really wanted to know what that was like. But yeah, we're so excited to dive into his origin story. So here it is. Let me know what you think. Enjoy. Hey Terry, how are you? Welcome to Pause and Rewind.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure having you here. I know that when I asked you, you were kind of like a bit taken aback to be asked, but for me, you are one of the reasons that I first got involved in staff networks. So really, when I think about my journey into kind of like, diversity and inclusion and what I'm doing now, you kind of played a pivotal role in that, to be honest.
It's really nice to say so. Thank you. Help me with that and, push you that way. I just feel I've listened to so many of your podcasts now, and all your guests have been high achiever, wonderful people. And I'm like, I'm Mr. Joe Average, but let's see.
Far from, first to start with, far from. But I am going to start with that question I ask every guest, and that is, what does the world look like for Terry Eastham right now?
Yeah, it's really weird. So it suddenly struck me that I'm old. I saw a T-shirt which I loved the other day, and it says, "I never expected to be the same age as old people." And then I got my Oyster card, my 60 plus Oyster card through, and like I'm an old man. Wow. So I'm looking okay because I'm still got all my faculties. I'm still enjoying life. I'm still doing silly things with friends. So yeah, that bit of the world's looking good. Looking out though, it's terrifying in many respects. I'm looking across the pond. I'm seeing what the Donald and his mates are doing, and they always say that what happens over there eventually rolls over here. And that's quite scary when you look at, the rights they've already taken away. They've only been in power, what, 3 months? and they've virtually changed the American Constitution. And um, without being horrible, because I am a Labour Party supporter, the Labour Party worry me a little bit because I don't think LGBT rights are that high on their agenda. The fact that Wes Streeting seems to have accepted the CAS report on transgender rights is worrying. And, one of the things they kept saying before the election was, we'll introduce a ban on conversion therapy. That would have taken 2 minutes work to do that, and they haven't. So, yeah, slightly worried.
It is concerning, and definitely, I hear you on Labour. They're not doing enough. They're not showing up for the queer community and marginalised people generally, in the way that Labour are supposed to. Uh, you started off by saying you're old. Firstly, whatever, who cares? Age is just a number. But you've seen so much of this before, right? Through history and the pushback on rights, and still feel worried. Do you think it's a case of it's going to get worse before it gets better?
I think it will. And I think also one of the things which you have to remember that every time there's a pushback, it actually bounces back on the people doing it. One of the things that has been mentioned on your podcast a few times is Section 28, and we all know that piece of legislation. It was a horrible piece of legislation. There's people still living with the consequences of that.
Mm,
But look at it from another viewpoint, if it wasn't for Section 28, Stonewall probably wouldn't happen here in
yeah.
the UK. And Section 28 pushed the LGBT plus, I don't want to say agenda, but it pushed LGBT rights to the top of people's agendas. People were talking about the LGBT community. Yes, there were people talking negatively, but there was a lot of people talking positively. And that's all because of a piece of legislation that was actually meant to be harmful to the community. So, yes, I am worried, and I think short term it's not going to be great. But I actually think longer term, and we're already seeing it in the States with some of the pushback on, states that were going to ban drag queens and haven't now, and the pushing for that. The fact that Disney has stood up to Florida about LGBT rights, I think they're going to find it comes back to bite them in the ass, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it has to. I think it has to. And also, I think something, I know that you listen to the podcast, and I'm so grateful, and I love that. Sue Sanders was talking about Section 28 on her episode, and how actually if people had dug a bit deeper into Section 28, um they would have found that some of it, if you don't just take it on the surface level, there are actually ways around it, and it doesn't stick quite like it's meant to. You
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think the problem with it was a very hastily drafted bit of legislation
know?
um, that they didn't think about entirely. And I think it was not so much what it banned as the fact it caused confusion about what you could
Yeah.
talk about.
Yes.
That was the big issue with it, I think.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. I mean, it's the sort of law of unintended consequences when they rush through legislation without thinking about it, and then find it doesn't do what they want. So they either have to repeal it or do more legislation, which just really annoys people.
That's it. That's it. And there seems to be this initial buzz of, yay, we've kind of put barriers up, and we've quite they seem to relish in that confusion, and it does have an impact to begin with, but then it will phase out eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it works like that. And also people can push back against it because they can. And it's weird. In my mind then, I'm just thinking about Harry Potter. And I know J.K. Rowling is now not a big friend of the LGBT plus community, and I can totally understand that. But there's a section in one of the books when Dolores Umbridge says, you teachers can only talk about their subjects. And the teachers push back by saying, oh, somebody's asked me the way to the toilet or something. Can I tell them what that is? And I think that's what happens with legislation like that. You have this great idea from their point of view, and then it just turns out to be stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is stupid. It's not just unfair and unjust and abhorrent. It's stupid and they're stupid on so many levels. And yeah, massive understatement about J.K. Rowling there. But the sentiments, yeah. I wonder if she looks at it like that now. If she ever thinks back to that sentence.
It'd be interesting to know how her mind works, to be
It
honest.
really would, wouldn't we all love to know? Because fuck knows, quite honestly. Um, when it comes to pushing back, I know how important community has been for you in terms of kind of, steering so much pride activity either through Unison or at London South Bank University, where we used to be colleagues. What was that first initial uh step out? Because I know that, you sent me your bio and it's having spent a long time swimming down the river denial. Terry finally stepped out of the closet at the age of 45 and became a proud LGBT activist. What was that moment like that you discovered community?
I think it was, I mean, so when I did come out of the closet, it was in my old job, which was a quite old-fashioned construction company. And it was a bit weird because some of the younger people were fine with it, but the older people, it was definitely an issue. And then I came to South Bank, and I had never been in a place that was more welcoming to diverse people.
Yeah.
And it was a shock, really. And I remember on my first day, we all went out for a drink afterwards. And Lynn Bradley, who I know you know, said to me, "So are you gay then?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you were talking about football at one point, then you were talking about musical theatre. So are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And that was it. And it was that
Boom.
easy. It was done. And then from there, I met Marcos, who was the chair of the network at the time, and he said, "Look, we're looking for members to join," and that was it. I was in, and it just went from there. I mean, it was just like falling into it because it didn't feel like I was doing anything different.
Yeah. But it seems to come so easy to you. I mean, you went from that to leading the network and steering our pride activity for so many years. Um, and you love it, right?
I do, and I was really surprised that we weren't at Pride.
Mm,
And I was also surprised, that first year we went. So the first year we went as a university was 2013. There was four of us, and we were with Stonewall, but we had university branded T-shirts, and we were the only London university there. And that was just amazing for me. I just thought that was the weirdest thing. Um, and then after that, obviously, we expanded. We had the bus. I think one year we had nearly 200 people there from our university. And but we were a real trailblazer because we were the first university that had everyone. We had staff, we had students,
yeah.
we had alumni, we had allies. People brought their kids along to it. It was just it was a real family sort of thing. And that was fantastic.
Yeah. And you steered that. Like, you really are an inspiration for, when it comes to advocating for the LGBTQ plus community and generally the way that you showed up at LSBU. It really did change so many people's experience.
I think it's important. I mean, I wouldn't ever consider myself a role model. I just think I'm just a bloke who gets on. I like organising things, and I loved organising. I love organising Pride. I mean, and it's something that's just it's got such a great purpose to it. And anyone who hasn't been on a Pride parade, I would say go on at least one because
Yeah.
it's one of the most amazing days you'll ever have. There's
It's
a
so
lot of
much fun.
standing around and waiting, and then eventually the parade starts, and you turn the corner onto Piccadilly, and there's just like this wave of love that comes at you and stays with you right the way through to the end. It's fantastic.
It is. It is such a beautiful experience. I remember my first one, and I did it for so many years and absolutely loved it. It is such a joy. And then there's your work with Unison as well. It's not just limited to kind of pride activities where you try and create more inclusive spaces for queer people. Your work with Unison is epic. You really throw yourself in.
Yeah, and that all really came about almost by accident. So what just I hadn't been at LSBU that long, and I'd never been a member of a union. My father was years ago, but I'd never been in a union. And in fact, I mean, I'm sort of almost ashamed to admit it now, but I was pretty conservative when I was younger. as at the time most members of the armed forces, because I was in the Air Force, you know, very much more on the right wing side of things. And then I just something happened, and I joined Unison, and then I got more involved, and again you start realizing that actually it is like a family, and they're there supporting you, and you know, from being at LSBU, I now work with the Greater London Region and also with UNISON's National Delegate Conference. Um, and it's important because rights are there for everybody, and everybody needs rights at work. And marginalised groups, they don't need them more than anyone else, but they might need people to focus a little bit more because it's very easy to overlook them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the really big things and important things that Unison does. You know, whether it's at a local level or nationally. You know, when I was looking back for before we started talking, and like Nowgo, which was one of the forerunners of Unison, they had Now Gay, as they called it, which was their LGBT group in 1974. So unions have always been involved with LGBT plus people, and now it's you know it's a big thing. It's really recognised, and you know if you look at the work we've done over the past couple of years with trans rights and trans visibility, you know I think it's something like 7,000 staff have had trans ally training over the past 2 years, and that's because the union said this is something we want to push, and that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, unions are so powerful, and I don't think that people give them enough credit for the change that they can bring. I want to talk about volunteering, and I'm a huge advocate for volunteering, as you know. Why do you do it? Like, because for me, I think that some people look at me and think, oh my gosh, you're doing something else, like you're getting involved in something else, and how do you find the time? So many people say that, and it's really hard sometimes to get across why I do it and the importance. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, why are you spending so much of your free time doing the things that you do for other people?
I think like so much. If I think about it, most of my life I've fallen into things by accident.
Hmm.
It certainly seems to be the way it's gone. But volunteering, I mean, initially I would, if I'm absolutely hand on heart honest, it was to give me something to do. You know, I'm single, I live on my own, I don't have a pet. So it was a way of making sure I got out of the house at weekends and evenings and things like that. But then you start to very quickly you start to enjoy it, and you get the bug, and then you go and you meet people that you wouldn't normally. You know, most of us spend like a huge amount of our life at work, so we meet these people here, and then we meet our families. But then by volunteering, you get to meet people you'd never meet normally, and I think that's amazing. It reminds you that there are people out there. There's lots of different people. They're not just the people who are in your work or your social circles. There's lots of other people, and they've all got stories to tell, and they need support, or they need help, or they need someone to talk to. And I think that's what's really important. And so you do get this almost like a bug for volunteering, where you want to do it and you want to go and see people. And I'm actually now at the point where I'm wishing I could actually volunteer more for certain things, because I mean, Queer Britons, we've both been involved in.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to volunteer to go down there and do one of the shifts for a long time, and it's just because it's really difficult to fit it in.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That was such a joyful moment. I mean, Terry and I, peeps, we were some of the original volunteers for Queer Britain before it had the museum over at Granary Square, that beautiful safe space. And I loved it. And you're right. There's, you might start for one reason, but there's so much more that flows from it. And definitely meeting people and hearing their stories, and just getting involved.
Yeah, and I think, particularly at Queer Britain, lots of people have stories and they want to tell them.
Mm.
My favorite one was I was on the door and this guy came up, and he wouldn't come in. And he was like, I thought, oh, God, this is going to be trouble. He's going to be bigoted. He's going to start shouting and so on. And so I'm talking to him. And it turned out his daughter had recently come out to him, and he didn't know how to handle it. And he didn't know what to do. So we had a long chat. Um, and then he's like, brilliant, I'm going to bring my daughter back and bring her in and show her around and everything. And and that gave him that, if you like, that bond with his daughter
Mm.
that he never thought he was going to have to face, and what just really didn't know what to do to talk to about. And I think that's one of the great things about somewhere, particularly like Great Britain, where people can do that. You can come down, you can talk to the volunteers, they'll listen to you, they'll talk back with you, and if you've got a story to tell, they want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing, and I do think that the volunteers want to hear it. But I think being a volunteer, you've often got your own story to tell, right? Some of the most interesting people I've met has been through volunteering, or and them being volunteers, or myself being a volunteer. And I think that storytelling is so important. And I think that when you're in a space which allows for volunteering, people are so open and generous and vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, my other great love, as you know, is theatre. And I've seen some amazing plays that have been based on real life stories of people who worked in areas. There's one at the moment called Sauna Boy, which is done by a guy called Dan Island Reeves. And it's about what it's like in a gay sauna. And that's based on his own real life experiences. And so he's turned that into a play. So your stories can become really good stories and really big stories. He's just come back from a tour of Australia. Swine. But yeah.
Absolutely. Well, listen, all stories are super, super valid and need to be heard. So you saying you're Mr. Average, far from Terry, I'm so excited to dive into your origin story. Are you ready to pause and rewind?
Yep, let's give it a go.
Here we go. Let's do this. Take me back. Tell me all about little Terry, or little Tezza, as Lynn Bradley would say.
So Little Tez was born in 1963, which I realise for most people listening is a long, long, long time ago. Um, my parents weren't married to each other at the time. My father was married to someone else. I would have been, I suppose, in those days you'd be described as a love child, which I've always thought is a really weird way of putting it. However, my mother says I was one vodka and lime too many, but everyone has their way of working these things out. Um, my mother was really lucky because obviously in the early 60s, an unmarried woman, her parents could have been really horrible, thrown her out. Lots of people were sort of chastised like that and thrown out by their parents. But in fact, her parents supported her. And so I grew up with her and with my grandparents, which gave me a lot of very old-fashioned ideas, I suppose. You know, my grandparents were of an age when you didn't show emotions. You didn't. There was a lot of things you didn't do. Children were seen and not heard, and things like that. So I think that obviously did influence me. And even now, I have trouble with emotions. I'm not great at showing them, or I show them way too much. It goes one extreme to the other. And then, we lived down in Southend, which was where I was born. I was there until I was about 14, when my mother actually got in contact with my birth father, and the two of them got back together.
Oh, wow.
Um, so that was a big shock for me, not only because I met my real father, but also I found out I'd got two brothers. So I was 14, and suddenly I had a 9-year-old and a 2-year-old brother, and I moved to Lancashire. So that
That's a
was that was
big
quite an
shift.
interesting time.
That's a big shift from Southend to Lancashire.
It is, and it was a very odd time because I moved into a new school. I had what they considered a posh Southern accent.
In
Um,
South from Southend.
I know compared to Lancashire, trust me. Especially in those, I mean, those days people still had really thick, heavy Lancashire accents. Uh, Also, I was a swot. I was a complete goody two shoes at school. I really was. I mean, I look back now and I'm embarrassed. I don't think I did anything wrong apart from once, and I got caught and I never did it again. It's the sort of person I was. Um, I never got bullied though, which was interesting. I was always able to talk my way out of things.
Okay.
Um, I mean, occasionally blatantly lying. Um, but it worked. It was really weird. So you look
Um,
like you're going to say something there.
no, not at all. I was just going to say, how much of the goody two shoes do you still think is there?
A lot. I'm really bad at breaking rules. Even now, it's weird. It's one of those things. I like rules. I like rules in life. Um, but then at the same time, I still do silly things where I will break them. But it's always got to be on. I'm a bit of a control freak in this respect. If I do anything, everything's got to be on my terms. So if I'm going to break a rule, it's because I want to, and it's because I don't believe the rule is right. So therefore, I'm going to break it. But if someone else were to break that same rule, I'd be like, no, you can't do that. Yeah.
I love that you own it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cheaper than going to psychiatrist this bit. So yeah,
Fair. And within that, I was going to just tap into, if you don't mind me asking, the emotion side of things. You know, trouble expressing your emotions. I think I've seen you get emotional pride stuff, but what does bring out the emotion?
the weird thing is almost everything, almost anything, I suppose. I was talking about this with someone the other day. I tend to cry at least once a day,
Hmm.
and it can be for what feels like no reason whatsoever. A piece of music or just something watching on television, and it just goes bam, and I'm in, and that's it.
Yeah,
Um, and maybe that's because I suppress emotions a lot, that they suddenly come out when I
yeah,
least expect them. But even sitting at work, I'll do something, then I'll just sit there and just for a second get an overwhelming sort of feeling of being upset for no reason. And then I can control it and it's gone. But yeah, so it is weird what brings out emotions in me. I mean, lots of theatre does, I have to say. I mean, obviously, I see a lot of theatre, but lots of plays, I get very emotionally into plays quickly. Um, and even though your head is saying, Terry, stop it. This isn't real life. That person isn't having that done to them. It's not bad. I'm still in there, and emotionally, I'm completely in there. I mean, to give you an example, 1984, the play by George Orwell. In the last scene of that in Room 101, there's a thing where Smith is the main character is about to have rats let loose on him. No, I hate rats. I hate
mm,
clowns as well. So I don't know if those two are connected, but I actually really hate rats. And I was sitting in my seat, which was about 5 rows from the front, and I was absolutely terrified about these rats getting out and jumping over. And it's like at the same time, my head's going, there are no rats on the stage whatsoever. It's a box with some squeaking sounds. So yeah, so it's really weird how I get into things emotionally, I think.
that's super interesting. And I think that that escapism, particularly of theatre, I'm the same with films. I'm not a very emotional person, but I will literally lose it in I can lose it in a film. It's that escapism. It's the journey to take you on, but it's also whatever emotions you've got inside that you might be suppressing or you might not have recognized manifesting themselves. There could be all kinds of reasons for it, but I think it's good to be aware.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't think I mean people have said, oh, have you ever thought about getting, just going to see a counsellor, getting therapy, having a and I'm like, don't be silly, I don't need that. I'm fine. I'm a typical and again, this goes back, I think, to my grandparents, the old-fashioned bloke. No, I'm fine. That's what we say, because we are. It doesn't matter what else is happening.
Do you want to, is that something that and forgive me if this is too personal, is that something that you perhaps want to challenge? Because you're a really, really progressive person. So to be quite tied to those kind of quite old-fashioned views of it doesn't really align with the Terry that I know.
No, and I think a lot of this is it comes out from the fact that I was closeted for so long.
Yeah,
So I spent the majority of my early life being afraid of coming out. I knew I was gay when I was 14.
right.
As most people sort of go, now I understand why I'm feeling this way. So I knew, but I threw myself into things where I couldn't be gay. So, for example, joining the Air Force, part of the reason was being gay was banned at the time. So that was a great place to go if you didn't want to be gay. Very weird, but I remember going on. I went on this weird training course a few years ago, and there was an awful lot came up, but then one of the instructors, she was talking to me sort of afterwards. She said, and it sort of stayed with me is, yeah, you may have come out of the closet, but it doesn't mean you've left all the baggage behind you. So
Right.
you still with so this whole image, I think, of wanting to project an image of somebody who is stable and sensible and everything else has stayed with me my whole life. And even though now I'm out and proud and I'll wear the rainbow and do everything else, there's still a big bit of me that's like to get under the radar. People, you don't want people to know it's you, sort of thing.
Yeah. I can imagine there's lots of people in that same position, with that same hangover mindset, whatever you want to call it. But I think the fact that you're able to talk about it it shows that you're aware, and maybe it'll be something you do about it, something about at some point.
Funnily enough, though, it's actually difficult to talk about, even with you. I mean, I know you've known each other a few years, but even now, I can see my hands shaking while I'm talking to you.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's really appreciated. What about favorite anecdotes that you've heard from your parents when you're growing up?
It's a bit weird because obviously I didn't know my father till I was 14.
Mm,
Um, and he and I had an interesting relationship because obviously we were quite late getting to know each other.
yeah.
Um, and we became quite close. And he'd sort of, yeah, we so he used to, it's a bit of a weird thing, this. So he worked for a company and he had a company vehicle and he used to claim his mileage. And he's dead now and he doesn't work for them, so we're okay with this. He used to overclaim his mileage every month. So we'd get to the end of the month and he and I would go for long drives, long drives, a couple of hours, so he could get his mileage up to where it needed to be. And we talk then about all sorts of things. It was quite amazing. Um, so yeah, that was actually it's weird. I just thought of that one, but again, my mother again, we didn't have that close relationship initially. She was a single woman. She was at work most of the time. I spent a lot of time living with my grandparents. So yeah, there's not much. I mean, I used to call my grandmother mum because I was out with her a lot.
Mm.
And then I think I realized it annoyed my mother, so I did it deliberately after that. Yeah. And I know she has mentioned that to me before. So yeah, that's probably about the most interesting one I could say on that.
It did the trick.
Yeah. I've always managed to know how to wind her up, so that's fun.
I love that. What were you like at school? So a bit of a swap, but what was school like for you? What did you think was the goal when you left school?
Uh, Interesting. When I came up to when I went to Blackburn, that was the fourth year. I don't know what they call it now, but it was the fourth year for me. So it was the year you started your GCSEs.
Mhm.
Um, and initially they put me in because they didn't know me and they hadn't got my old school record. So they put me in the sort of, although officially they didn't segregate people by ability, they did. So I was in the lowest one. So I think my first 3 months at that school was all about getting up to what was the O level GCSE standard. So that was a fight and that was focus. And I did that and I managed to get up. When it came to doing A levels, at the end of A levels, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go into the armed forces, and sort of already mentioned one reason, but there were quite a few reasons why I wanted to. But my father was dead set against me going into the armed forces. He'd been in the army, hadn't had a great time. My grandfather had been in the army, had a wonderful time, but my father he really didn't want me to go in. I'd looked at a couple of universities, but I was really not sure. I wasn't confident enough to go for that. So I said, well, look, I'm going to take a year off. And I know these days on a gap year, people, they go to Chile or they go building homes in Africa or something like that. No, I went to work for a shop in Accrington. So I went there as a trainee shop manager, and then didn't leave. I got promoted to shop manager, I think, after about 6 months, and I had my own store. And then that gave me the confidence to be able to say to my father, I'm joining the armed forces, I'm joining the Royal Air Force. I said that just as the company I was working for actually went under. So the timing was perfect for me. So I left that job and then went into the Air Force, which was what I'd always wanted to do. Um, but yeah, I never made it to university, which do I regret it? I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know if university would have given me what the Air Force gave me. Um, but yeah, so that was it. So I was never really sure. And even now, I always find it funny that every year at the university, we welcome new students, 18-year-olds, come on in, come and do your degree. And we're asking them to make decisions about where they want to go with their lives at 18. I'm 61. I still don't know what I want to do for a career. But
I hear you. I hear you. But there's, I think that what comes up on this podcast time and time again is that pivoting and flexing and still figuring it out along the way. I don't think any of us really always are dead set on it. Some people might be, and if they are, great for them. But I know that I'm not. I know that so many people I speak to are not.
yeah, yeah, it's true. I think, yeah, and that's part of the adventure of life is
Yeah.
you just don't know. I mean, you take this job that I'm in now. I joined the university because I'd been out of work for a few months and I didn't want a big gap on my CV. So I
Yeah.
took a job for, in my original plan, 6 to 12 months. And 12 years later, I'm still there.
I mean, we started in the same year. I think you were a couple of months before me, literally, and I was there for
Yeah.
10 and a half years. It's wild. I'd never planned to, and I think there's the difference between, and I think that some people, when they say, I don't know what I want to do, I haven't quite figured that out, it's really not down to a lack of drive and ambition. It's just it shouldn't be reduced to that because I'm not I have so much ambition, but that doesn't mean I'm strategic or I have a set goal in mind.
No, I think you're right. And I think, people can become too focused on this,
Yeah.
and yeah, and you see it particularly, 18-year-old coming into university and like, I want to do this degree, boom, because their parents have said you need to be an accountant, you need a job that's safe and secure, da da da. And then they get in and they realize that isn't what they want to do.
Yeah.
They actually want to do games design because it's something they've got a fantastic talent for. So I think you have to be careful about setting your target too early and being too
Absolutely.
rigid about it.
You've just mentioned parents. I'd love to go back to those relationships with your father when you said, I'm going to do this. How did he react? Like, did you have conversations about it? Did you go off with his blessing?
I think in the end I did. Because when I first said it, I was 18 and he was really, really anti. But then when the next time it came up, I was just coming to 21, slightly more mature. I had worked in the real world at that point. So I think he realized firstly that I hadn't just rushed into the decision. It was something I'd been thinking about for a long time. And that I wasn't actually going to back down this time,
Mm.
you know. And so he had two alternatives, which were to support me or possibly lose me. And I know he didn't want to lose me as a son again because he lost so much of my childhood. Um, whether he fully supported me or not, I don't know. But he certainly gave me the impression that he supported me. And I know when he came to my pass out parade, he couldn't have been prouder. So I
That's
think he
gorgeous.
was on board by the end.
That's gorgeous. Talk to me about those early memories of the Air Force.
Um, so, and the training's all changed now from when I was in. And as every veteran says, oh, it's easier for them than it was for us. Everyone says it. We have to. It's part of the rules. I think the first 6 weeks, so the 6 weeks basic training, are absolute hell. I mean, they are. They have a purpose, which is to take a, you know, 18 to 20-year-old off the streets, who does this, that, and the other, and turn them into a member of the armed forces. So it is hell. And they looking back during the time, it was hell, but it was a really great shared experience with the other people in my flights. So that there was a positive because we all pulled together. And looking back now, I can see what they did, and there's a definite low point. And I mean, I would guess if you asked most people, who went through basic training, they would say, yeah, there's a low point. And I remember for me, it was about 4 weeks in this 6 week course, and I phoned home, and my brother came on the phone, and he was crying, saying, "When are you coming home?" And that started me crying, and it was just awful. And then they build you up, and they build you up to something amazing.
Mm.
You know, at the end of that 6 weeks, you do your pass out parade. Your family are there, your friends are there, there's senior officers there. You march as one, you do everything you're supposed to. And when you march off that parade ground, you just feel this is amazing. You know, I was, I was going to say it's better than sex, but let's not be daft. But, but it is a fantastic feeling. And from there, you go on to your trade training, and that's a lot easier. And then you go into your various units. So, yeah, I think you have to be a special type of person to be able to do it. I don't think it's right for everybody. There's friends of mine who I know would have been asking to leave within 2 or 3 days. Um, but it's definitely it's an amazing thing, and you also, you meet and you make such amazing friends out of it. I've still got friends now who I went through training with. Who, one of my best friend Alan, I was best man at his wedding, and if I ever get married, he's going to be best man at mine. So yeah, it's horrible but great.
What do you think that you specifically loved so much about it? I know the meeting people and such, but what else meant that you felt that sense of belonging, I guess?
Because everyone's going through it with you.
Right.
You've got a flight of 60 or 70 people. You're all going through this. You're all suffering. You're all, you know, some of it now sounds really stupid. Like you spend a whole, a few hours making what they used to call a bed pack, and then you wouldn't sleep on your bed because you didn't want to disturb it. And they come in for the morning inspection to throw it across the room. And I don't think they do any of that stuff now. It was, as I say, completely different days. But you're really pissed off. You're fed up, and someone will help you pick it up and put it back together again. There's always going to be there someone who supports you, and you're there to support them as well. So I think that for me, that was the big thing, was having people. I mean, don't forget, I hadn't. My two brothers were quite younger than me, and I hadn't known them for the majority of my life. So these were all people around my age group, and we're all pulling together with a common goal. And I think that would be it.
How long were you in the RAF for?
I joined in 1986 and I left in 1995.
And do you miss it?
Sometimes I do, yeah. I think I joined. I think I left at the right time.
Mm.
I'd done some fantastic tours. I'd spent 9 months in Belize in Central America. If I'm honest, not working that hard, but yeah, having a great time. I'd been on an active squadron who'd taken part in, operations. I'd worked different camps around the UK as well. So for me, it was the right time to go. When I first left, I missed it a lot. Uh, could not believe how easy civilians had it and how much they whinged
Mm.
for no reason. Um, and it was quite funny, in some respects. So, like in the Air Force, you go to work every day, basically, unless you're dead. You know, that's it. You can be sick, but you've got to be really sick. And then when I got my first job in the real world, and there's people phoning in sick each, I don't feel, I've got a hangover this morning. I'm going to phone in sick and things like that. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. It was just so different. But I adjusted very quickly, I think. I mean, I'd been lucky because one of the postings I'd had in the Air Force was at the Ministry of Defence in London, which is basically like being a civilian, but earning slightly more than the civilians did at that
Mm.
time. So I wasn't a complete stranger to non-Air Force life. And I know there's lots of people who do have problems. I think something like 25% of homeless people are ex-servicemen because, they go in at 16, they leave at, 40, 50. that's been their entire life, and they have real trouble adjusting. I was very lucky because I did adjust very quickly.
Yeah. What was it like navigating your sexuality and being part of the armed forces?
So it was easier than you would think.
Mm.
The best bit about being in denial is being in denial that you're in denial.
Okay.
So if you're in a very, very heteromasculine area sort of situation, you fit in with them. I mean, fitting in is one of the things I've always done. So you fit in with that and you don't think about the other stuff. You know, that's out of the way. I mean, even so, I did twice, three times, I was investigated for being potentially gay. Um, but yeah, it was a lot easier. It was only really those times that it sort of brought home to me that I definitely am, and I'm hiding this from myself because then you've got to, when you've got the RAF police interviewing you, you've got to be very careful and think about what you're going to say and everything like that, and
Yeah.
you can't give any hints that I mean, even funnily enough, even the fact I used the word gay was considered very, very dodgy by the RAF
Right.
police because the armed forces word was queer.
Right.
We didn't call people gay. That was what gay people called gay people.
Right.
Admittedly, their interrogation techniques left something to be desired, but that was the sort of mentality you were dealing with, where just the use of that word raised their suspicions.
Yeah. I chatted to Kelly Holmes about this on my podcast with her, and she shared her experience of that of being investigated. And it being something that she found quite traumatic. Is it something that you got over? Did you, after the first time, did you carry the fear?
I think after the first time, the fear is always with you,
Right.
and you do become um, you sort of become a little bit more cautious, but at the same time, you can't change your behaviors
Mm.
because if you do, that then looks suspicious. So, I just carried on being me and just, we laughed it off.
Yeah.
Myself and the other guy that I was accused of, we both laughed about, good God, even if I was gay, I wouldn't want to sleep with you type thing.
Right.
It was done like that. And our friendship group, which was quite large, 99% of them were okay with it. They were like, we know you're not. It's just some bullshit sort of thing that's been someone said something and it's been picked up by someone else, and then that's it.
With that, did you find that element of fitting in, and probably the word we would use for it now is masking? Did you find it draining? Did you struggle with it internally, or was it just the denial was that deep?
I think that on the whole, the denial was that deep. The only times I struggled is when I was working at the MOD because you were living on a camp, but it was totally different. You weren't there, and particularly if I got drunk, which I did a lot when I was at the MOD. I mean, you're in London, you've got good money, what else are you going to do? I would quite often end up in Soho and go and buy a video that I shouldn't buy, and then smuggle it onto camp, and then watch it once with the sound virtually turned down, and then record over it with anything else. So that was it. I mean, alcohol was always the problem in that respect, but I was actually really good, bad, depending on your point of view, in that that is all I would do. Is by that I wouldn't go. I didn't go to a gay bar or you know anything really stupid.
Yeah. When was the moment that you when you decided that you were going to put the denial to one side and come out and start living without that denial, I guess?
So I came out of the Air Force, as I say, in 1995, and it was probably around 2008. Right up till then, I'd still carried on just living my life. And my friend Jo, she was really close at the time, and she kept on saying, "Come on, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." In fact, actually, that's not true. So I never said I wasn't gay because I don't like telling lies. So what I would say is, "Oh yes, of course I am. It's obvious, isn't it?" That way of telling the truth, which gives someone completely the opposite idea, I became a master at that, really did. So anyway, so she comes out, and then one night it was a Saturday night, we were down at the South Bank drinking Cipriano, I think, or something, going to see Evita. How gay can I be?
It's one of my favorite musicals.
And we were talking about Brokeback Mountain.
Wow.
So we're sat there doing this, and she said, so come on, are you gay? And I just went, yes. And that was it. There was no, like I said, a lot of things I just fall into. There was no conscious thought. It
Mm,
was just, yes. I just went, great, I knew it. And that was it. And we carried on talking after that. So it wasn't a conscious decision to come out. It wasn't, that I thought this is my moment. It was just, I stopped saying no.
yeah. Was there a sense of relief?
Huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah.
There was a sense of relief for one day. So the next day, the Sunday, we went down to Balance for lunch because that's what gay people do. I just jumped straight into gay lifestyle after that. But then, so that was fine. But then it was like, at some point, I've got to tell my parents.
Yeah.
Um, so after it not being a problem because there was nothing to tell my parents because I was in denial, it now was I'm living two lives.
Mm,
I'm living one down here in London where I'm gay and I'm out on the scene, I'm doing this, that, and the other. And then I go home and my mum's asking me, oh, when are you going to settle down and get married and everything else? So, yeah, there was a real sense of relief, but at the same time, it opened another door of, worry.
yeah. How did they take it?
Um, so I played a bit of a blinder here. I told my brother first, my oldest brother, Tommy, who was slightly younger than me. And we went out for lunch in a pub on a Saturday afternoon. And the reason I did that was because I knew my parents would not make a scene in a pub. That would have killed them. They would not have done that. Um, and I reminded them of a game of Trivial Pursuit we played a few years ago where Cliff Richards came up and someone had said, oh, if you're over 30 and you're not married, you're obviously gay. And I said to them, oh, do you remember that game? They went, yeah. I said, well, I'm over 30, I'm not married. Ta-da! And my mum was fine.
Okay.
My father's was one of those people who was not surprised by anything. He'd been there, seen it, done it, everything. You could say to him, "Oh, I went up Kilimanjaro wearing a kilt," and he'd be, "Yeah, when I went up Kilimanjaro, we didn't even have a kilt." He was that type of person. But this was the first time I think I actually surprised him because I was like, "Yeah, you ain't got that one, have you?" Um, and then he said something which, at the time, pleased me, and then afterwards really pissed me off.
Mm,
He said, "It doesn't matter. You're my son, and I will love you." And at the time, I was like, "No." And then afterwards, I was thinking, "Hang on, I'm your son. You should love me anyway.
yeah.
I shouldn't need that reassurance that just
Yeah.
because I've come out, you're now going to love me." But I actually appreciate because my father was a Catholic, so for him that was quite a big thing.
Yeah.
But at the time, yeah, it was really weird. I was really like, "Oh, thanks, Dad." And then it was only afterwards, I'm like, "Oh, twat," you know.
Did you
But
manage to
yeah,
address it?
my mum's just one of those people who she gets on. She just
Mm,
gets on with
yeah.
everything. And so, okay, my son's gay, move on. Yeah.
Yeah. And been so supportive since.
Yes, yeah. In fact, both of them were. My dad never really liked it. It has to be honest. And he'd make silly comments like, "There's a lot more of you types about now," and I'd be like, "Yes, that's because we're not afraid of getting beaten up every time we walk down the street." There. But then I introduced him to David Welton, Misty Lee, the drag queen,
Yeah.
who they sort of adopted as a surrogate son. So he used to go for Christmas with me and everything like that. I mean, you've met Misty. She is as camp as a row of tents, let's be honest. and they loved David. They absolutely when they had their 25th wedding anniversary, they got David to perform as Misty. So
Love
I
it.
was a bit iffy, but the rest of the gay world was good. That was all right.
You take it. You take it.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
So when you left the kind of the armed forces, what did you think you wanted to do career wise? You know, having left that massive chunk of your life behind. And I think it talks into probably a little bit about just seeing what was happening.
I think it was less about a career and more about location.
Okay.
So both my parents, my father in particular, expected me to move back to Lancashire when I left the Air
Mm,
Force, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew I was going to live in London. Um, and I sort of looked at my skill set at that time, and I'm a pretty good administrator. One of those backroom boys who just gets things done type thing. So that was what I went for. So there was no real plan apart from I'm staying in London.
yeah. And London is home, home, home for you, right?
Yeah, it's weird. People talk about when you're sick of London, you're sick of life, and then I talk to friends who say, "Oh, I could never live in London." I watch these programs, relocation, relocation. I'm like, you're standing in a field looking at trees. Why? You know, I would never. I love London so much. I love being here. I love the freedom of the city. I love the friendliness of the city.
Yeah.
People talk about it being a cold city, but it's not.
It's not. It's not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Are you happy to share about someone who has shaped you the most along the way?
So in many respects, both negatively and positively, it would be my mum and my grandparents.
Mm,
I mean, my grandparents gave me a lot of values that, yeah, are quite old fashioned, but actually they're good ones to live by. You know, be respectful, look after things. Think about what you're doing, all that sort of thing. And my mum, I think, because my mum is probably the ultimate pragmatist. She just gets on. She doesn't really seem to get phased by things. Um, and my father died, and then late last year, my brother died. My youngest brother died, and yes, it was traumatic for her, but she got on. Whatever she was feeling internally, she was she was able to carry on with her life because that's what you have to do. You don't get a choice.
is that something that you think you've taken away from her in terms of the way you approach situations and that not trying not to get phased by things?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most overworked phrase I use in my life is "it is what it is."
Oh, it's one for the bin for me. I'm going to ask you
It's
about a
I'm,
phrase in a
I'm just
minute.
looking at this because I have said it's one for the bin. I would love to be able to bin it, but at the same time, and I think also part of that is the Air Force training
Mm,
because you could be sitting in your room watching TV, and then an hour later you're on a flight out to Northern Ireland to drop off a part for a helicopter. You know, you just do it. You do what you have to do.
yeah.
And so it is what it is, actually. And I know actually, if you ever Google that phrase, it says, oh, it's used by sociopaths and all sorts of really dodgy, bad people.
Oh, wow.
So, and I use it all the time.
And you said earlier about you feel that you fit in. You just strive to fit in, but do you feel that sense of belonging as well? Because I see you as someone that really strives to create an environment of belonging for other people, and far from accepting it is what it is, you really try and change that narrative, particularly for queer people. Are you able to challenge yourself a little bit on that around the importance of fitting in versus true belonging?
Yeah, and I do on certain things. I think there's a bit of me that looks and goes, is this a fight worth fighting?
Mm, yeah,
And if it is, then yes, I will go for it. But if not, that's when it is what it is comes
yeah.
in. Yes. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. That we've had a lot of changes at the university. My team's expanded. We've lost people. We've got new people in, and I want them all to be part of my team and be happy in their not necessarily happy in their jobs because not everyone is. Let's be honest, but feel that they want to come to work and be with us as part of a cohesive team unit.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's important to do that. And I do, if I think something is definitely wrong, I will challenge it. And then I'll go one of two ways. I'll either challenge it to the point where somebody's telling me to shut the fuck up, or I will go, fine, that's it. It is what it is. You're on your own
Yeah,
type thing,
yeah.
and walk away.
Yeah, I mean, hey, sometimes self-preservation is key, but I know you got a fire in you, especially when it comes to other people, and you are such a team player. Um, and this is all down to your own definitions, does happiness and success look and feel how you thought it would?
I never really had an idea of what they should look like. I mean, if like we said at the start, what does my life look like for me now? I'm pretty content. I've got to a ripe old age. Um, I've got my faculties. I've got a life that I enjoy, uh, and I've got friends that I love, and I've sort of got someone I'm seeing, and so yeah. I mean, I suppose ultimately, probably because we weren't very rich growing up or very well off when growing up, um, I would put in my own mind, I would put money as a major thing for happiness, and that's why I do the lottery every week, so that one day I can go into work and say, that's it, guys, I'm out of here, you know, and go and buy that beautiful place overlooking the Thames.
And what about kind of career wise? Because you've recently had like a quite a big promotion and stuff. But you worked your ass off to get that.
Yeah, I've never really been that massively career orientated. I'd like to move up the ladder, but at the same time, I do have a concern. I look at the next two grades above me, if you like, and they lose contact with people and lose contact
Mm,
with not with reality, that's harsh, but with real people.
yeah,
I'm at a senior enough grade where I can still go to enrollment and go and meet the new
yeah,
students, go to the graduations and things like that, and do those things, which is all part of the whole university story for me.
yeah. No, I hear that. I hear that absolutely. My final question for this segment is this. Looking back so far, what are you most proud of to date?
I think if I'm honest, it would be the Air Force.
Yeah.
Because that was a big adventure. I moved away from my home, I moved away from my family. I I wasn't sure I'd make it through the training when I got there. And I did. And as I said before, there's no feeling better than graduation and passing out parades. It's just amazing. And I think of all my 61 years, that day when we graduated, May the 8th, 1985, is my number one day.
The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day raid, and on a Saturday afternoon you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor. I have some quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Sure, yeah.
Don't sound too enthusiastic.
Of course, yeah, go for it, Neil. Let's do it.
I'm joking. What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
I'm going to cheat here slightly.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to go for a stage show, but it has been released as an album, so it counts. And that's La Cage aux Folles,
Okay.
which, for anyone who doesn't know it, is the story of set in the 1960s down in the south of France. It's two gay guys, and they've got a son who's heterosexual, and he wants to get married. And for me, it's an ultimate story of family, love, and life. The things that Zaza does for her son, even though Zaza's a man, and Zaza is the drag queen's name, but even though, and the son initially turns away because he's marrying the daughter of an ultra conservative minister, and it's just an amazing story, and it has got my favorite song of all time, my favorite anthem of all time. I would say, "I Am What I Am," um, which I think is so weird because when you see it in the show, it's actually sung as a song of anger
Mm.
and defiance. But it's also, as I mean, obviously you've been out on the scene. It's a song of pure love. It's a song of celebration. Whatever type of thing you want, that song can cover it. And I think on the days of Pride, you get fed up with it because every single bar you walk into, someone's playing it. But at the same time, it's there, and I think it's one of the ultimate anthems. There's other ones that have come up like "Let It Go," things like that. The one that I've completely forgotten. There's just odd ones as well, but that one I think will always stay with me.
Oh, I love that. I love the fact that you pointed out to the defiance and the anger of that song because I think it's really important to recognize that as the emotion behind the song as well. Were you a fan of the Birdcage? Obviously, kind of like a reimagined version.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely love the Birdcage. I think Nathan Lane and Robin Williams are just the most beautiful
Yes.
gay couple.
Yeah.
Honestly,
And what a whole cast actually for that film.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Gene Hackman is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, it's such a great story. In fact,
Yeah.
it's funny enough. I can't remember the guy who plays their son, but I hated him for years because of the way he treated Nathan Lane. I was just like, even though at the end, there's the redemption bit, I
Yeah.
was still like, you bastard.
They take you on a journey. You believe, it's you get really invested. I love that film. I haven't seen the
Yeah.
show, so okay. So we've already covered this a little bit, but a saying that you live by and one that you'd put in the bin.
So I want to put it in the bin, but I never will. It is what it is. Saying that I would love to be able to live by, and I think it's a great saying. Now, this is where you're going to hear me try and speak Spanish, so it could all go disastrously wrong. Are you ready?
Yep.
So, vivir con medio es vivir a media, which means a life lived in fear is a life half lived.
Okay.
And I think that's such an amazing quote. It's actually from a movie, Strictly Ballroom,
Mm.
1992 movie. But I just think that would be such a great saying to live by. And in some respects, I think I do do it. As we said, if it's something I think is important enough, and I will go for it, despite the potential for fear. So yeah, that's the one I would definitely love to live by permanently. Yeah.
What's been the best adventure of your life so far?
I mean, as I said previously, it's the Air Force was definitely in there. Because it gave me the confidence to be me. While I was in the Air Force, I did a 2-week tour of the USA all by myself, traveled from one end of the country and back. Um, I also did hospital radio or armed forces radio initially, then hospital radio, things I would have never dreamed of doing when I was little Tez back in Blackburn. And I think the other thing is, and it comes down to the unison stuff, is being an activist. I love being able to, although I'm my own worst critic, I love giving a speech and persuading people about something. We're moving a motion. This is why I think this motion's important. Um, so yeah, so that's the two, and there is a third one that we're going to sneak in
Go for it.
on the best adventure, which is theatre. Because of reviewing theatre, I very rarely know what I'm going to see.
Yeah.
And there is something magical in being completely blown away by a show that you weren't expecting to even be interested in, but you're seeing it because you're reviewing it.
And you fit so many in as well. Like, your love for it shines because you literally are always reviewing.
Yeah, I mean, before looking back, sort of pre-pandemic, I was doing around 200 shows a year. Since the pandemic, I have cut back a bit because I've also got UNISON stuff in there as well. So, and apparently I have to work sometimes. So,
Oh, fuck that. What three words would you use to describe you and your origin story?
unremarkable, standard in some respects, but also bedazzled.
Unremarkable, standard, and bedazzled.
Yeah, I think on the whole, my story is pretty unremarkable. Lots of people have gone through life. I've been very lucky in many respects. My parents didn't turn against me when I came out. I've never, fingers crossed, so far been homophobically bullied or attacked or anything like that. So in that respect, I think I've had quite a lucky, unremarkable life, and fairly standard. I've just gone through. I just go through life. But I also think the bedazzled bit is there because every so often something shines. It just comes out.
I love that, and I love the way that you embrace it as well. I am going to challenge you on the unremarkable thing, and I hope you don't mind because I, I couldn't think any different of you to that word. Like, like I said, you inspired me so much, and the way you show up for people, I would say that's pretty fucking remarkable. And I hope you take that with
I
the
will.
heartfelt meaning that I'm putting behind it. Let's fast forward a little bit. What exciting things do you have coming up?
So at the moment, I'm planning for LSBU going into Pride.
Well, hey,
Uh, it's that time of year again. Um, we're also hopefully going to be at Croydon Pride again this year. But I may be there with Unison rather than with the university this year. Or maybe I'll do both. We'll see. So that's really big, and that's coming up at the moment. There's things at work we're planning. There's some big things coming up, which are really uninteresting to anyone listening to this, but for me, they're quite exciting. So I'm looking at those. And again, theatre. I've got some really good stuff coming up. I'm seeing a very camp version of Dracula next week, which is just transferred over from off Broadway. I'm going to see the Book of Mormon again the week after. So yeah, there's some good stuff coming up.
sounds it. Can't wait. Bring on Pride season. What brings you joy?
Oh, yeah, aside from waking up every day and still being here, which is useful, it's just it is theatre. I honestly say that's one of the big things. Just leaving work, forgetting everything in my life, going in, sitting in a darkened room, and watching people far far braver than me do something amazing. And it doesn't have to be West End. It can be a very small thing. I mean, I've seen a lot of one man shows down at the Vault Festival where for a whole hour you're totally transfixed by that. So that is. And I think the other thing, if I was honest about brings me joy, is so we've got national LGBT plus conference coming up in October, and in November. I'm going to be a month early apparently, and that always brings me joy because it's a bit like Pride, but it's over 2.5 days, and everyone there, you just feel the love. And it's great to catch up with people from all over the country you haven't seen for 12 months and to listen to some really inspiring speakers and to leave there with that sense of no matter how bad the world is out there, it's actually, there's a large number of people who are trying to make it better. And that really feels great.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are one of them. My final question for you is this. Do you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for anyone out there to help them get to wherever they're going?
I think be true to yourself and don't let anyone force you to do anything. One of the things that I dislike in life is National Coming Out Day. I think it's an unnecessary pressure to put on someone. I mean, I had my friends saying to me, "Come on, are you gay or not?" And I could imagine if they were like, "Hey, next Thursday's National Coming Out Day, Tez, you can do it. Come on," things like that. So I don't like that. If you want to come out when you're ready. Don't let anyone else force you into it, and do that with everything in your life. You can't control everything. Lots of stuff you will be forced into, but always be true to yourself. And then when you're ready to do something, and particularly if it's about coming out, when you're ready, you do it on your terms.
Very, very, very wise words there. Terry, thank you so, so much for spending this time with me. I have loved getting to know you more. I do think you are remarkable, and I'm so grateful that, yeah, our paths crossed at LSBU and you continue to be someone that shines bright for me. So thank you.
No, thank you very much. I really love being here.
Cool. I'll see you soon. Cheers.
See you soon. Yeah, bye.
There we have it, the wonderful Terry, aka Tezza, to so many of our mutual friends. It was wonderful making this time to sit and chat to Terry all about his origin story, those experiences of growing up, and the amazing story of his parents getting back together kind of 14 years later, and that his relationship with his mum and his dad, including that wonderful anecdote coming out story. I'm 30 and not married yet. This conversation wasn't without its challenging topics as well, particularly around um, you know ideas of expressing emotions and that being influenced by his grandparents and by what could be deemed as some old-fashioned approaches to uh, therapy, counseling, emotions. And it's great that Terry is aware of it. And emotion can manifest itself in so many different ways in the way we express it, in the way it's regulated. And it was interesting to hear Terry talk about that being heavily influenced by years of being in denial in the closet about his sexuality, but the joy and relief that came after that. And Terry continues to, show up in the world loud and proud despite the impacts of being in the closet for so long, if you will, in the way that he works with Unison, organizes pride activities, and his work as well with the armed forces, being involved as one of the first members of the Royal British Legion LGBTQ branch, and one of the original volunteers of Queer Britain. So he really does show up as very, very loud and proud. Terry is a remarkable person to know, and Terry's words to describe him and his origin story. Not unremarkable, standard, and bedazzled, and I love how Terry is bedazzled by the world and the color, particularly the love and magic and joy he finds in theatre. And community and volunteering. But I am going to disagree with unremarkable and standard because I think that he is a truly remarkable human, and I'm so glad to know him. I'm so glad that you have got to listen to Terry, and as he shares his origin story. Once again, Pause and Rewind is going live. Save the date, 16th of April. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you'll join me on 16th of April along with Shah. Please do like, subscribe, share, comment, help get these conversations out there to a wider audience. And until next time, take care. Cheers.